there are people when we are in their presence that we just feel differently, or it kind of connects us in a different way, or it does something with us in a positive or in a negative way. So that was the interesting experience. When I was sitting in front of that Ashriji, my mind was just completely calm. And I was just able to experience, in a way, I would say, the most beautiful version of myself.
Hello and welcome to the Wordful Woman podcast. I'm Christina, your host, and my guests are people who operate at the intersection of science and spirituality. It is my great pleasure today to speak with Dr. Kriti Nanda. Kriti, I'm so happy to have you on.
Thank you for having me here today.
Oh, thank you so much for being here. So, for our listeners, Dr. Kriti Nanda is a medical doctor, medical transformation and mental health coach, researcher in contemplative sciences, meditation instructor, keynote speaker, and charity volunteer. As a medical doctor with a special interest in psychosomatic medicine and a holistic approach, she is offering mental health, stress prevention and management programs, self reflection workshops with energy based processes, as well as meditation sessions, facilitating well being and personal transformation with a capital T, about which she will share more later on in the episode. But first, Kriti, I would love for you to give our listeners a deeper sense of the many hats you wear and share what led you to your multifaceted professional activity.
Thanks for the introduction, Christina. Yeah, I think that started kind of right from my birth. So I grew up with different cultures. My father's from India, my mother is European. So there were always, I would say, many colors in the pot. Like, yeah, I was always used to not just, have kind of one perspective, but I was always, whatever it was, interested in what would the other perspective be. So I wanted to help people. That was just always kind of my genuine wish, and I loved to study and to read books. So that kind of naturally made me study medicine. And when I started practicing, I felt that there was a limitation which frustrated me. And that's absolutely, obviously, no criticism to medicine or science. It's amazing work what's being done there, and it's just beautiful. But there was still a limitation, especially when it came to the practical aspect. Like when I had patients there, and especially when it came to mental health issues, I just felt like I can't really do much. So either I treat the symptoms on the surface, but I did not understand what the cause was. No one really can come there. It's just like kind of you operating in the dark. It felt like that. And I was not really able, or I had the feeling I was not really able to help my patients. So I was just in that kind of state, and I always knew, like, I grew up with yoga and with a kind of let's say Eastern spiritual background as well. Although I would never really deeply dive into it because I was just too impatient. So I would rather go for a jogging round, or it was just not I was not made for that at when I was young. Um, but then gradually, like when all these things came more into my were more apparent, I was like, there must be some other way as well. And I really wanted to start with some meditation. I've been waiting for a very long time. I never really found, in a way, the right person I would want to learn it from, with the right technique, because it kind of had to really fit me. And then I was just being open. And then some 3 years ago, I met my guide and my teacher and my friend, and that kind of opened a completely different path for me. And with that, all my other, let's say, things I'm passionate about, and what I now, in a way, would say I found my purpose in my passion, that kind of could unfold in these last 3 years. And that led me to basically finally start getting into more social projects and volunteering, which is not very, I would say, is not very common within the medical fraternity, because we are normally very, very busy with the work that we are doing. And apart from that, there's hardly any time, and then you just want a time for yourself. So I kind of made a conscious choice there that I would, reduce the hours and really do that what I love and what I'm passionate about as well. It's not that I'm not passionate about my work, but that is just kind of one facet or aspect. So the other thing is I'm volunteering for social projects, especially in India, and we just recently. Well, now it's actually the inauguration is tomorrow, but the whole work kind of finished last week for the children's home. So they're very, very happy about that. And I started doing meditation and diving a little bit into these contemplative sciences, and had some like experiences myself. I was like, this is very interesting. I want to understand that. And that kind of led me then to this transformational coach, meditation instructor, and more contemplative science research work as well. So that's been kind of a journey, and I'm just really happy to be to be there where I'm here today. Yeah.
What are contemplative sciences? Because I recall the first time we connected, it was a term that I had to look up as well. And I think that's something that could be very interesting for our listeners. Could you share a bit more about them?
Yeah, I think contemplative sciences. I think, in my understanding, it's basically that what I would call the intersection between science and spirituality. So it has to do with meditations and with different techniques. Um, let's say spiritual practices also, but also things like mindfulness practices and everything. And then basically the science behind it, or trying to understand the processes, the methodology, if there are results, and if they're applicable, and all of this. So this is how I understand contemplative sciences.
Thank you. And to our listeners, we will talk quite a bit about science behind spirituality later on in the episode. And to give a bit of background to that work, Kriti, could you tell us a bit more about one very important person in your life that you have already mentioned? And this person that had a big role in your spiritual journey, Maitreya Darashriji. Just before your answer, I'd like to give a little bit more background to our listeners. Maitreya Darashriji is a medical doctor and founder of Matribot Parivar, a social spiritual organization whose vision is to help raise the consciousness of humanity, laying the foundation for a more happy, peaceful, and sustainable world. They pursue this vision through transformation programs, including an energy based process whose efficacy has so far been supported in a pilot scientific study, as well as in a follow up study published in September 2022. Listeners, you can find links to both studies in the show notes if you wish to read them firsthand. According to their website, thousands of people have participated in their programs and experienced positive shifts in their lives. And with this brief background, Kriti, I'm going to give it to you to tell us more about Maitreya Darashriji and all the work that he's done and his impact on your life.
Okay, yeah, that's well, I'll introduce him first, and then basically how I met him, because that's a long story which goes 20 years back, and I will kind of keep it short, don't worry. So Maitreya Darashriji is, as you mentioned, is a medical doctor, and when he was an atheist, but he was very like curious about nature of also of the body, and how like perfectly that works. And he was always he perceived himself always a little bit different in terms he asked questions that no one would understand. Like he recalls that when he was in school he would ask others that what is the difference between me and you, and why do we think differently, and like he had always many questions. And when he worked as a medical doctor and practiced it, then he realized that the kind of deeper understanding, or let's say that the cause of the suffering was still in a way undiscovered, and that led him to contemplate and to turn inwards, let's say, in an inner journey. So he meditated for many years, and in that time he had like different saints and etc. appear to him, and he had some mystical experiences. And in one of them, his guru, his master, Mahavatar Babaji, which is he's an ageless saint in the Himalaya, or a guru basically. He basically appeared to him and disclosed his purpose of life. And with that deep understanding, so Maitreya Dadashriji basically had passed all the phases of basically the spiritual parts, and he's in a complete transformed state, in a very high consciousness, you can say. And out of this understanding, he developed these techniques, meditations, energy processes, to help basically the people to connect back to the heart. So it's actually very, very simple. It's just to help us connect back to our true nature and experience that, and hence lead, in a way, a happy life, because we have entangled ourselves quite a lot and complicated life, and it's supposed to be much, much easier and simpler if we are able to connect back to that true nature, which is love, and which is then also the base of social well-being, and of what we all, I think, in a way, are looking forward to see in this world. So this is his kind of vision, and in 2013 he founded a social spiritual organization, Majhul Parivar. And yeah, now coming back to me, I was, as I mentioned, I grew up with these two different cultures, and I was always, it took me many, many years to kind of integrate these two worlds into my being. And it was a process which I would say recently kind of was completed in a very peaceful way. And in that time I was living in Italy, and I found this one book. I don't know if you've heard of that, the autobiography of a yogi by Yogananda. So it's quite a famous book actually, and Yogananda was one of the first ones to bring the Eastern spirituality into the West, into the US at that time, and it kind of became a bestseller, this book. And in that book, Mahavatar Babaji is mentioned, so Maitreya Dadashriti's guru. And I remember when I read his name, and when I read about the stories that, you know, the people were telling, and when I saw his pictures, I just felt so connected in a way. And I could not explain that at that age. I was just 14 years old. And when the book was finished, it was almost like a pain that, you know, that book is finished, and I don't have any other, you know, contact points. And I remember I wanted to go to India, to fly to the Himalaya and try to find him there. And then I was like, okay, this is not going to work. And I just put disappointedly the book aside, and I was like, okay, I just have to be in this world and, you know, just do my studies, and the rest, the spirituality, is whenever it's time for it, in a way it will come. And while I was studying, I have to say I drew a lot of energy and strength from that spiritual part. I would you know, with different ways. It's spirituality, I think, means different things to every one of us. For me, it meant to connect to my heart in whatever way. And that was always there present. And it was a very like stabilizing factor for me. And then when I moved to Switzerland, my brother was here for to visit me, and he was working in the hospital. And in one of the flights back to Austria, he used to live there, he met Kevalia, which is basically Kevalia brought Maitreya Parivar to Europe, and he met him there, and just randomly in the bus to the plane, and then randomly they were sitting next to each other in the plane as well. And he was like, oh, I met such a like charismatic person. And I saw the picture because my brother shared it with me, and there again I felt really connected. So some months later I met Kevalia ji, and he was then telling about Maitreya Dadashriji, that was basically his guide, and about Mahavatar Babaji. And then obviously I got super, super curious, like, there is Babaji's back in my life. I want to see him, who says that it's his master. So Dadashriji came for a session to Zurich, and I was just completely curious to just see him. And when I went there, it was, I think, one of the most special experiences in my life, in a way that even before I saw him, I just felt so happy internally, just so content, as if something I've been waiting for a very long time, was finally like now unfolding. And it almost felt like a children's birthday, when we were small and we would look forward to our birthday, it felt like that. And I was completely surprised because I didn't know these feelings from inside. It was something completely new. And then when I saw him, it was just like deja vu. And I'm not someone who normally who can see auras or things like that. Absolutely not. I'm quite rational. I have my more emotional part as well, but there was just like, what's happening with my body? Where are all these reactions coming from? And I remember whatever Darashvili shared in that evening was so simple. Like, that's what I love about him, is the simplicity. Is no complex teachings or preaches or anything. It's just very, very simple, but it's as if you're here at the first time, and it is as if you immediately experience it with yourself, within yourself. So it was just like, wow, it makes sense. And I have never really understood that before, although it seems very simple. And this is about simple, like, concepts of ourselves, of life. And we did a short energetic process, which was very profound in my eyes. And then I just somehow felt like I want to learn more about him and about what he does, and that led then to one to the other, basically.
You mentioned the concept of a guru, and I would like us to talk a little bit more about that. My first question would be, at present, do you consider Maitreya Darashriji as your guru? And yeah, actually, let's go with that first. I have a million more questions.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that topic up. I think it's a very important one, also because it's very controversially discussed, and especially I know in our Western culture. And I would like, if you allow me, to introduce more the Eastern aspect of a guru. And I understand the kind of prejudices that also are here in the Western part of the world. They have their reasons. But there is also another aspect of a guru. And if you look at the name, guru is a Sanskrit term, and gu means darkness and ru means light. So it's basically the one who brings light in the darkness. Now, guru itself is basically a teacher or a guide for your spiritual path. And spirituality there being not something esoteric or mystical necessarily, but just simply about yourself, to understand yourself, to connect to yourself, and to really, be able to just live your true nature. And this is where, if you think, when we went to school, then we also had a teacher who kind of, taught us how to, write ABC and how to learn the numbers and everything. And similarly, a guru is nothing else than a teacher who helps us on this path. Because we can imagine how, like, it was difficult for us to learn and to write when we were 5 or 6 years old. So the spiritual path, this inner world, also complex. Like, you need someone who guides you through that, who tells you that, very practical steps, that you need to be careful at this turn, and here this might happen. So it's simply about that. And it's in the ancient scriptures, the guru disciple relationship is a very, very sacred and a very beautiful relationship, which is nurtured by mutual respect and care. So it's a very, very special. There, even in some scriptures, it's said that it's a relationship which is also above the mother-child relationship, because it goes beyond. So it's said that it lasts for lifetimes. So when you see it from that thing, it's something very, very beautiful. And if we look at from that concept, then yes, Darashvili, I would consider him my guru, but he's above all, he is my friend, because I know he would not like to be called a guru. He always says, like, don't call me guru or teacher, anything. I'm just a friend. I just want to be there as a friend. So that's why I would leave it with friend and with friendship and that relationship. Also because, times have changed now. I think we're not having that concept anymore of sitting under a tree and meditating and having, the kind of revered master there. But that emotion is definitely there. But let's say for the modern world we are living now, it's more that of a friendship, because we can relate more to that. And I'm very, very thankful that Darashvili kind of offered this kind of relationship to everyone and not, telling that I'm a guru or master, because that would have made him unapproachable. But with that, everyone can just relate in a very natural way. It's just like a best friend who is always there, because it's not confined or limited to the physical presence. That's the beautiful thing. Like in these 3 years, I think I've seen him 5 times or 6 times. So yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing more on this, because I think one of the reasons the idea of a guru might be controversial from a Western lens, which is why I really appreciate that you brought the Eastern lens on this, and illuminated this term for us. Um, there have been unfortunate cases of people who have proclaimed themselves as gurus, who ended up being harmful for their followers. Therefore, I suspect people might be wary of this particular way of walking the spiritual path. And I wanted to ask you, as someone who is walking this path, how can people, anyone, um let's say someone who could be their guru or their spiritual teacher, outside of Hindu and Buddhist faiths, comes into their lives, but maybe they're a little bit wary, maybe they're thinking, oh, is this really a good idea? How can they protect themselves? How can they discern if this is really for them, if this is good for them?
Yeah, yeah, I think it's a very important question. Um, and I completely agree. If you had asked me 3 years before, I would have said like, no, thanks, I don't need any guru in my life, and definitely not any living being who like proclaims himself as that. So completely agree. And as I said, there are reasons why we are having these prejudices and misconception. I completely understand. And I think it has to do a lot with, there was a lot of brainwash in the past done through these kind of concepts or manipulations. And also, there are so many myths of spirituality which just are not true. Spirituality in its true sense is so natural and so simple. So, coming back to your question, I think what helped me, if I talk out of my own experience, is that I never felt limited or dependent or bound to anything. On the contrary, I felt how much freedom I actually have, and I am not utilizing, or I am confining myself. So someone who helps you to actually experience freedom, if that is something which you sense. And on the contrary, if you sense there is too many rules or too many, do's and don'ts, which is unnatural, right? Then I think this is something where we should be careful. It's also important that that natural aspect is there. Everything which allows you to completely unfold your potential naturally and to live yourself, where you're not being told you need to do it like this or you have to do it like that, but where it's all about just be yourself. Just listen, what do you want to do? Just explore yourself, this is another important point. Then being someone who has many, many questions, I think it should be someone, a true guru, if we call it now like that, should be able to answer all your questions. And he should also encourage you to ask questions. Also, having said that, whenever I'm sitting in front of Dada Shvidi, I don't have any single questions because I'm just like completely peaceful. And my mind is peaceful as well. But that is definitely a part where you should be able to ask questions, difficult ones, and you should be able to get clarity. It shouldn't be like some, kind of dialectic, like intellectual discourses, but it should be very, like, it should immediately within you bring that realization that, oh wow, yeah, that realization moment should be there. Um, it should be someone who helps you to really discover yourself, to understand yourself, to truly accept yourself, and all this in a very, natural, simple way, not complicated like teachings or concepts or whatever rituals or anything, but just just that natural way. And I think ultimately it's still an experience of the heart. Is like, I mentioned when I saw that Ashwidi the first time, that what immediately was within me, my husband was sitting next to me and I just told him it's him. And I till now I don't really know what I meant with these words, but it was just something which came from deep within. It's like an experience of the heart. So I think if we connect with ourselves, we will get the feeling that is that person right, is, and then obviously we have our mind, we analyze things, that what is this person talking about, what is the what are the intentions, is it about making money, or is this person really doing something practical as well? How are the people associated with this person? Are they rigid? Are they, all these things. And I think putting these two aspects together, checking some things with the mind first, that is important. As I said, I would never have like walked the spiritual path if not my mind would also have allowed me and would have said like, yes, that's safe. I would not have started it, because you can get so easily lost there as well. And a guide, let's not even say guru, teacher, or master, because it still has these little bits of a bitter taste to it. But a guide can take you only as far as he has come himself. This is also important to know. And the state of a guide or of a master, it will be revealed by the way he talks, by the way he acts. So just by observing someone, you can already see, when you connect to your heart, that does that make sense? Is this authentic? And I think these are some things which at least worked within my being, mind and heart, where I was like, yeah, it's basically it's him. I think that's important.
I think this is a really good point, where you could share more with us about the concept of transformation that you have already mentioned. What is the meaning of transformation, and how does one even start a journey of transformation?
Yeah. So transformation is, if you put it very simple, it's a process of becoming a better being. And this is a kind of, if we now talk about spiritual transformation, spiritual meaning that this dealing with the self, basically, it's a kind of very deep shift within, a positive shift, where which gradually unfolds, and where we slowly are able to get rid of our blockages, of our false self, let's call it like that, which is our conditionings, our prejudices, that which kind of influences us, limits us in a way, and which comes also from our past experiences. But that's what we don't really want to be. We want to be free, and we want to be, happy. So all these conditionings, all these blockages, in that process of transformation, they slowly dissolve, and we are more and more able to really get aligned and in tune with our true nature, which is basically unconditional love. So getting back to that experience of it, this is transformation. And this is basically a journey of, you can say, of the self, of us, of the soul, whatever you want to call it. And it's a process which starts very, very easily. Like even everyone listening here can initiate that process themselves just by saying yes to transformation. So you just need to say, yes, I am open to a change. I'm open to become a better being, to work on me, and then this process starts as like a kind of declaration of intent. This is to how that process of transformation starts. And then afterwards, obviously, there are tools and processes how to accelerate that process or how to deepen it. But in itself, transformation is always on. It always happens. It's basically change is a constant in life. So the transformation is not just limited to us. Everything is transforming. We are, even from a more collective consciousness, in a transformative process. And the more we ourselves work actively on that, the more we can also contribute to the collective change of consciousness. And this is why transformation is so important, because ultimately we don't really have a big like influence on the outer world, but we have it on ourselves. And this impact is big enough because it contributes to the collective consciousness, so to say. So in that way, it's a process. It's a journey, and it's automatic. Is a passive process. You don't need to do much anywhere there.
Thank you for that beautiful explanation. And you mentioned something. Well, you mentioned many things that I really resonate with. But I specifically referred to this idea of coming back to our true nature as unconditional love. And I find this not that it only personally resonates with me. I find it really interesting because I find it has a lot of implications, right, for how we live and what we find ethical, and how we treat one another. I was in this lecture recently on the philosophy of love, and one of the ideas that the speaker brought up was, I think they were quoting someone else's proposal, but it was basically this idea of, should we, because there's so much injustice in the world, so should we seek to cultivate negative, if let negative between brackets, emotions such as anger, rage, to be better equipped to stand up to injustice? And that with it didn't sit well with me. And I'd really love to hear your take on this, also given this context of transformation and coming back to unconditional love.
Yeah. So the thing is, first of all, we wouldn't be able anyways to control these negative emotions, because they are there, and there is a reason why they are there, and it's not just like a kind of mental process that they are there. So that is has to do, or lies basically deeper in our being. But ultimately, obviously, we should not cultivate something which is not fruitful, right? So the thing behind that question, I think, if someone asks that, should we still cultivate these emotions because they might help us ultimately to still stand up for injustice, the thing behind that is still love, because someone cares, because someone wants things to change, and that shows us that behind everything there is ultimately, it's always love. And it's only love that can truly change things, because that is just such a powerful and supreme energy or emotion. There is nothing which is beyond love. So if we want to change things, and if we really want to basically have a lasting impact, and something which is in a way also, which which won't be turned over then again after 50 years or something, then I think it can just be done through love. And I think history has showed that, where there was no force put, but when people acted out of love, that's where beautiful things were created. And the contrary of love, which is fear, is not hate, it's fear, it never created anything positive. So if we really want to bring a lasting change, we should try to do things out of love, but at the same moment, not judging the other emotions which are there. They also have the kind of right of existence, and at the right time they will also dissolve. But it's always important to see from which intent, or from which space, out of which space are we acting. And that should always ideally be love. Like, for me, it has become kind of the mantra of life, that let love be the answer to everything. And that's just is just the easiest, because then you won't do things out of ego, you won't hurt others. So that's, if you want to go ahead in a sustainable way, I think. And it sounds cliche and it sounds cheesy, I know, but it's the ultimate truth, that love is our true nature, and this is the only thing which is going to last. So I think that I would say that, let's just be aware of that, but not try to harbor the contrary feelings.
I agree. And I love how you put it, that, behind that intent that was expressed was love at the end of the day. I don't intend to demonize emotions such as anger. I consider anger a friend. I think, it's that friend who tells you something went wrong, maybe even horribly wrong, and it's time to do something about it. Um, the the part of the proposal, I think, that didn't sit well with me was the idea of cultivating anger. For me personally, that didn't sit well, because I would rather focus my efforts on cultivating love, like you said, and finding solutions from there, which, yes, maybe not in a cheesy way, like that, sometimes you do have to get angry. Sometimes, I think you do have to take, like, measures, like, but I think that the intent behind it, like I said, really really matters. You come from a place, one way I heard it expressed is, do you come from a place of for something or against something?
Yeah,
Is this something that also resonates with you? Yeah.
yeah, definitely.
Kriti, could you share a little bit more with us, about your personal transformation journey? You mentioned this personal mantra of yours, to let love be the answer to everything. Are there other insights or particular events from your own journey that you would like to share with our listeners?
Oh yeah. The question is if you want to hear them. So no, joke apart. Um, it was an intense time, definitely. It was also a time where many things surfaced that I wasn't aware. There were kind of being there within me, emotions, as you mentioned, um, which I never felt before, like emotions like anger. Like loads of anger came up, and I was like, I'm not an angry person. I'm like the most kindest person. This is what I've always been told, that you're such a kind person. And I realized that this is part of me as well. It's just a part which I never allowed myself to express. So it was, it is an ongoing process, of getting to know myself better, the parts of me. And of obviously, as I said, the kind of theoretical concept or construct about transformation is that you dissolve the blockages and you experience your true nature. And in a practical level, that dissolving of the blockages is something which you can feel. It surfaces on the mental, emotional, physical layer. You can feel that there are times where you feel like, wow, now I'm really facing something which is coming up. I always have this picture, of a pond where there's a lot of things in the like in the depth, and then it comes up, blah blah blah, and then you see it, and then it just goes away, and then afterwards there's just like all nice lotus flowers. But before that, there is a lot of cleansing needed. So this is my kind of mental picture. um, on a very practical level, I've become so much more patient. There is still some, like, I'm still impatient, but much more patient, much more accepting. Like when now something happens, it's just like I just try to see what is it that I can do. And if not, then I'm just able to accept it and just make the best of the situation without, fighting it or struggling and just losing unnecessary energy and trying to, swim against the current. Um, More understanding. That's the interesting thing, is that the moment the relationship with yourself changes, it also changes with other people around, because when you understand yourself, you also understand the others. And that's an interesting concept about transformation, which is just brilliant to observe when it happens in a way to yourself, is that when you get lighter and blockages get dissolved, your awareness level automatically gets heightened. So you operate from a different awareness level. It's as if, you get a tiny little bit of a bird's eye perspective. And that just happens immediately in a situation. You understand the situation, you understand the people. Not always, as I say, is a process. So I'm still having, and life, just rest assured, life will send you the instances. The moment you think like, yes, I have learned it, then it's like, have you really learned it? And then you get a situation where you just completely lose it. But the tendency is there, definitely, is a good tendency with a learning curve. And I'm just more understanding of other people. It's like, but hold on, when someone reacts in a way which would have triggered me, like horribly, 3 years ago, now I'm able to see that pain in myself, that if it triggers me, it has to do something with me, and B, to understand the other person, that the other person is not doing it out of, like a wrong, like of a bad intention, but it's just the person is feeling a pain there. And then immediately another element comes in, which also goes along with transformation, is compassion. You develop that sense of compassion, which is very interesting, because it was a super, how would I say, elusive kind of concept to me before. But it's also in the science of meditation. There is really good researches, and one is where basically it's been shown that the empathy or the feeling of compassion gets strengthened. So it's literally the soft skill, which is in a way you can learn it and it can be trained. So all these things, I feel lighter. I feel less stressed. Definitely, I'm able to be more relaxed. I'm able to be in the moment. This was something I wasn't able to be before. I was always either in the past, mostly in the future. I had my to-do lists, and now it's just it's a lot of more work because we have the projects along with work. I'm just able to be so much more focused and calm. I do not multitask anymore because I see how much it actually harms like my inner alignment and peace. So I just do one after the other, and I'm able to experience silence, which is the most beautiful gift ever. So this is some of the things. It just helps me to be lighter, more at ease, definitely. And I found my purpose. Like I know very clearly now what I want, how I can work towards that. And it's not that challenges are less, like the life is just the same, but you just kind of handle it differently.
Those sound like some wonderful outcomes from your journey of transformation, and something that I think we all desire. I don't think you listed anything that anyone listening to this would say, no, I wouldn't like that. Um, so, with that in mind, I mentioned earlier that one of the programs offered by Matribot Parivar has been investigated in a pilot study, and this was specifically an energy-based process under the name of Matri Shakti Prava. And we're going to go into the science, but before we go into the science behind it, could you describe in broad terms what this energy-based process is Matri Shakti Prava in particular, and how it takes place? So, from the perspective of a participant, what do they see and what is happening?
Yeah. So Maitri Shakti Prava is a energy process, you can say, and it was developed by Mature Dadashvili out of the deep understanding of the functioning of the human mind and the layers beyond that. And it's an energy process wherein transformational energy is being transferred. It's an intervention in that sense, an energetic intervention, and that intervention addresses all the layers of a being, the physical, mental, emotion, but it goes especially very, very deep into the spiritual layers of our being. And wherever blockages are there, it slowly, gradually, basically dissolves those ones, helping us to connect basically to our true nature. And then there are different benefits, but in itself, it's basically an energetic intervention and a process of a transformational energy transfer, you can say.
Could you share? This is something that I ask a lot of guests on this podcast, namely what we refer to when we say energy. My sense is that it's always slightly different depending on the context. So I'd love to know in the context of Matri Shakti Prava, what is this transformational energy?
Yeah, so if we see energy itself, like in science, physics, or as a generic concept, because it does not differ in spirituality. That is very important. It's not a spirituality talks about any different kind of energy. Then energy is something, let's say it's the strength required to for a certain activity or to make things move or basically for an activity, and it's there. It cannot be created, it cannot be kind of dissolved, it can just be, changed from one form into the other. And so let's say it has different manifestations, and what happens in Matri Shakti provides that an energy of a very, very high is a very high energy, basically gets transferred to the being, allowing there to correct wherever corrections are needed. This is a kind of a very high quality kind of energy. Is basically, for me, in my understanding, it's the energy of unconditional love which operates there. But it's yeah, that's all that I can say.
Thank you. I want to also share a little bit personally on this intervention, because thanks to you, I took part in it back in May 2022. And um, it was very new territory to me. So I'm talking from the experience of the participant. Kriti was facilitating. So there were a couple of meditation exercises that we did remotely. So I was at home. I just logged into Zoom and I was into the session. Kriti gave a presentation explaining the process. Then we had the meditation exercises. And then something that for me was not familiar at all, we had the image of Maitreya Darashriji, which was, as you explained in your studies that we're going to talk about in a second, a positive, energized image of love and peace known as divine light. And this is the medium through which the transformational energy is transmitted. And to me, I remember thinking, okay, this is not something that has been familiar to me on my spiritual path. So I kind of did like a short prayer in my mind, and I was like, okay, God, please only allow this if it's good for me, basically something along those lines. So I like to think of it as spiritual boundaries when I'm not too sure. And I wanted to ask you to tell us a little bit more about this image and how it works, because I had so many questions then, and I think this is a great opportunity to ask you.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, it's the divine light which you're referring to, and it was the same for me when I saw it first time, and my mind was fully active, and I was like, okay, this is the picture now of a living being, and why, how, what was exactly what's going on within me. And then I was like, okay, you know what, just experiment with it, just try it out. It might be completely crazy, just try what happens. And what I experienced was my whole transformation and journey is very subtle steps. You know, the big things that I mentioned now is more retrospectively. During the thing is very subtle steps. I just realized that something is happening there. And I did the Metri Shakti Prava in physical presence. That was pre-pandemic. So what happened was when the pandemic happened, Maitreya Dadashriji kind of designed that whole process in a way that it could also be administered online. So basically, we have a physicist in Maitreya Parivar, and when this whole process was changed to online because it was not possible elsewhere anymore, I remember I said, like, this is amazing how Dada Shriji is able to like operate from such a high like consciousness level, that this process is possible to be done online, because it's not kind of hocus pocus. It's real. It's real processes which are based on physical laws. Don't ask me why, because I do not understand it, and I'm still planning to ask that Shriji that. But I know the effects of it, not just on me but on others. So something is definitely really deeply working there. And I still remember when that was when it was changed to online. I thought, like, how should that happen online? Like, already the physical process was kind of a lot to digest for the mind, and now it should be like even happening like online. And I think this is where, you know, where we are, I would say, at the, yeah, again, intersections of science and spirituality. There are things which are beyond the mind. This is what I learned, and or what I experienced, and I'm very, very happy that at the beginning of this journey I realized, and I think part of it is because I read the book at the age of 14, and there was some things which worked me. I was like, okay, I'm not going to understand everything there. So it's better if I don't try to, because I'll just struggle, because there are things which are beyond the mind. Because if you look at our mind, we are dependent on what input we get. right? So even our senses are limited. There are animals who can kind of listen and see better than we do. So if already the tools by which we perceive our surroundings are limited, then obviously also the input itself is limited. So I realized there is so much more beyond. So in a way, if we fall in love with someone, this can't be explained, right? Or if we read like a poem can't be described in a mathematical kind of like formula. So I realized, okay, there is something which is beyond, which I won't be able to understand, and this is why I was open. And this is in the sessions what I always encourage people as well. I always say, like, don't believe me. I don't believe Maitreya Shwiji, but just try to be open, experiment with it, play with it, and just see if you feel a change within you, because this whole transformational journey is an experiential journey. It is about the experience of you, what you experience, how you feel. So this was basically where I was like, okay, I'm going with the divine light. I'll give it a try. And coming back to the divine light, it's an active image. It's energized, where basically the Dada Shwiji's consciousness, basically that consciousness where his state is fully active. So you are able to connect with that when you basically look at the picture, and through that picture, that energy process happens when it's being done online. And I know it sounds absolutely abstract or kind of it might sound really strange, but it's like when you look at electricity and the bulb, right? We can't see the electricity, but we need the bulb in order to basically see the energy behind it. Or we are full of energy, but in the end, we just see the body jumping or laughing or shouting at someone. So in this tangible world, also energies need like a medium, to be carried. And the divine light is ultimately that. It's just like the light bulb where then the energy flows through and is being transmitted. And I know it still might not be understandable for the mind, but again, this is more of an experience. This is more of something which is beyond the mind and which needs to be explored and discovered, I think, by everyone themselves. Only then you will believe it. So
I fully agree with you that if our very perception is limited and we rely on our perception to make observations, even to apply the scientific method and have, the body of science that we have, we're clearly limited in what we can and cannot see and potentially even comprehend. I'd like to offer something here to those of us who feel maybe not so much at ease not having an explanation of the mind. We do live our lives utilizing things that we don't fully understand how they work.
I agree with you that there is so many things which we use on a daily basis and we never really question it. And when it comes, this is something which I really find fascinating, although it's getting less. But when it comes to spirituality, then people get super critical. And I think also this has to do with that inherent fear, with something which basically was there as a misconception of spirituality for a long time. As it's like just, like this 25-minute process, just try it out. It's not going to harm you. But it's interesting to see how people there get really like, more into their mind. But it's getting less. What I observe is people are more and more open to also explore this part, because I think what we are seeing is that the mind is not just limited for us. It has also created a very, very limited reality where we are not able to solve the problems. And I think if the driving force behind everything was more love and less, formulas and statistics and everything, maybe the world would look a little bit more different. But this is just more perhaps a utopical or very idealistical thing. But I think not everything can be done and understood by the mind. So we should just be able to distinguish and discern that where is it where I'm operating from the level of mind. It's needed when I work, when I have to take decisions, and when can I operate more from the heart. And what we are now doing is mainly and all the time operating from the mind, and that has led to the state of mind we are today, right? Like the mental health burden and everything is because we are not able to find the right balance anymore. So I think it's always about finding the golden middle, path, and too much of nothing is helpful in the end.
I agree. I also believe we overly rely on a certain way of approaching the world that is more analytical, let's say, and we do reward that disproportionately as opposed to creativity, though creativity does manifest in a lot of analytical types of roles, but I mean also in the sense of things that you don't immediately see a utility for, like art. But the utility is there. It's just not in a form, I think, that we we can conceptualize with the analytical side. And I agree with I hear you about this imbalance. Also, we do live with a certain amount of unknown, and we do scrutinize spiritual topics. We do tend to scrutinize them a little bit more maybe than we would other things that we could see as more mundane, or I don't
Mhm.
know how else to express it. But one way that we can take away some of that unknown is by looking at the benefits, like you were talking about from personal perspective as well. Okay, we apply this intervention. Are people actually better off? Maybe the how still has some unknown, but are people in the end better off? And that's something that I feel um, you are achieving through the studies that you've conducted on the Matripot Parivar process. Could you tell us a little bit more about them and some of the things that you found?
Yeah, so we did the first study that was before I even got to know about the process. That was in 2018, which was a study. It was a beautiful study from study design, but it was just a pilot study. No, we just had a limited number of participants, but there were already some very promising results. And that at that time, I really liked that study design because it included functional MRIs, aspect of the brain, neurocognitive tests. So it was really some, hard facts in a way. But obviously it was just a pilot study. So we decided, this was 2 years ago. I know actually the whole inception was pre pandemic, to do another study. And then the pandemic happened, and we were like, okay, we don't want to drop the idea of conducting a study, a follow up study. So we do it with whatever is available there. We are offering this process online. So let's do an online study. Which obviously changed the whole study design, and it's a study design which has definitely, it has its limitations, but this time around, the strength is a number. So we had 420 participants, which is a strong number. And in this study, we basically chose like the inclusion criteria where people who had minimal to no spiritual practice or experience in the past, so who were not meditating, praying, or anything which could be like related to that, and they got a mental well-being scale to fill out. It's a questionnaire of 14 questions, a Likert scale, which are basically these 14 questions belong to 5 major, you can say, like areas, and some being like affect or satisfaction or interconnectedness. Like these are like big areas. Then they underwent that online process, so you did that Maitri Shakti Prava. And then for 21 days, they were given a small exercise, 20 minutes a day, to just basically spend time with themselves and connect back to that moment where they got Shakti Prava, so that this kind of process could be like going on and was nurtured. And after 21 days, basically they were invited again to fill out the same well-being scale, and then we just saw whether there was a difference in the pre-post basically answers. And the interesting part there was that the findings that we could see in the first study as kind of promising results, the kind of matched with this result now. So that there was a statistic significant level in the energy levels perceived, in the feeling of empathy, interconnectedness, basically everything which had to do with interpersonal relationship, and also with basically feeling more relaxed. And in the first study, we had more more criteria also which had to do with information processing, because we had the neurocognitive tests. Here we obviously did rely on this mental well-being scale. So it was we were very happy about the results, because they also matched amongst like the questions, because obviously the questions that belonged to a certain area were not just like one after the other, that basically question 1 to 5 was affect and 6 to 10 was kind of satisfaction or something, but they were kind of mixed. But you could see that the clear tendency was always within a certain sub topic, or so that was quite nice. And what made us also happy was that we were able to represent in that study a group which was particularly affected by the pandemic, which is the young people between 18 and 30 years old, and also women. They were the majority in the population. So there were some. So we are very happy with the study, but we're definitely not going to give up here. We plan some bigger studies on that. Which is also interesting for me, because I do not really need it, to be very, very honest. I don't need any proof. I've experienced it, but I think it's important. It's also important to show that we are trying to put some, rigorous scientific kind of, or an approach to kind of show that results are there. And then let's see what the future brings. But I'm very sure that the future is going, the future concept of health, of mental health, is going to change a lot. And I was doing some research along with this research more in meditation, like techniques, and what is there in terms of studies, and just the amount, of studies which have been done on meditations in the last 15-20 years is there's been so much which happened in this period of time, and which is now ongoing with the ongoing interest. Like during the pandemic, I had literally the feeling every fifth of my patients started meditating, and I was like, what is happening here? Like when I was growing up, even yoga was seen as a sect, so now we are in meditation. So like in 30 years, that's quite a step. So yeah, I think the approach is important. Our intent, as we are some doctors and scientists within Metrobot Parivar as well, to just try to see how can we also combine science and spirituality, and bring these two seemingly poles kind of together. In the end, for me, it's just different sides of the same coin. Yeah.
I think you're doing a really great job with that. And even though, like you said, you personally don't feel that you need the results of a study to know that the process is beneficial for you, I feel also from personal experience that sometimes when trying to balance this analytical, we can call it scientific approach to life with our spiritual nature, if you will, or leading from the mind versus the heart, or however you want to put it. Um, in my experience, seeing some science behind some of the concepts helped me trust in my experience more, and helped me with my own personal discernment of my experiences. So in that way, I think science can help with discernment on the spiritual path.
I agree.
Um,
It's because the mind is calmed, and the mind is like, okay, I'm gonna play along now because it's fun for me now as well. So it's that kind of thing. And I think it's all, as I said, it's all based on physics. So we might not be there yet. And if you ask me, I can't tell you more in detail. I'm still learning, I'm still discovering it. But what I know also from ancient scriptures and from that is that it is based on physical laws. So we will see what kind of surprises wait for us in the future.
yeah, it's really exciting. And I wish I understood more physics. It's something that's on my list. So much to study about. So, Kriti, I want to ask you, because you mentioned a couple of resources today, and we said we would put the links to the study in the show notes. Is there anything else in terms of resources that you would recommend to our listeners who might be interested in anything that you mentioned today?
So yeah, for the mind, the two studies, and else I would definitely suggest to just try out both one, because it's an experience. So I think that would be the biggest kind of resource, to just try it out yourself. Apart from that, there's obviously the homepage of Metro Parivar, where the different projects, also social projects, are described, because that is the next step. Once you experience it for yourself, then you obviously want to share it. So, where that compassion or that self-service aspect comes in. So we have many projects also for if anyone is interested in taking part, with an amazing family of friends across the globe, which is just growing, and is amazing when you need something and then you're like, oh, I know him in this country, and then you just recently I needed something from India in one city, and literally within an hour it could be delivered in that city because we knew people there. And I was like, this is my kind of a vision for the future, where we just like all connected, all friends, where we might not even know ourselves but each other, but it's just like, she needs help, definitely I'll be there. So that was a very, very nice experience. So the homepage. There is also a book that I wrote. It's called "The Cause of Suffering is the Lack of Love," which is basically his kind of gist of his experiences and teachings. And apart from that, there are actually many interviews by Matthieu Darashvili on YouTube. So to different topics. So whoever is interested, just to also in a way experience the presence and what the presence does within us, how it connects us to ourselves. This is very interesting. There are people, when we are in their presence, that we just feel differently, or it kind of connects us in a different way, or it does something with us in a positive or in a negative way. Because we always think in positive and negative in these kind of dualities, but let's say for our minds, it does something positive or something negative with us. So that was the interesting experience. When I was sitting in front of Darashvili, my mind was just completely calm. And I was just able to experience, in a way, I would say, the most beautiful version of myself. And I was like, wow, this is such a calm person, such a peaceful person. And wow, I really feel well in this body. And it was this kind of very interesting thing. It always happens in his presence. And I think it's just when a person is in that kind of state, it radiates that. And the beauty is, this is there within every one of us. And this is what Darashvili wants to help us to connect to that state, and then be able to radiate that, light and love for others, so they feel it around ourselves. And that is something which I found completely fascinating, because I know my mind, it's super hyper active all the time and jumping like a monkey back and forth. And whenever I'm like in any of these kind of in Darashvili's presence, or when there's a process, energetic process, then the mind is just different, and it's just calm, it's just there, and it still asks questions, and it's like, why, how? And I'm just like, just chill, just enjoy, and then we see afterwards. So I've kind of also realized that my mind can be my friend if I just take it in a playful way. So that helped me a lot, because sometimes, especially in spirituality, is always like the mind is, the kind of the bad boy and everything, or the bad cop. So I think it's the mind just does his work as well. It's very important, and we just need to be able, as we said, find a balance.
Oh, that's beautiful. And I love how you put it. The mind is our friend and can be our friend. I want to ask you, Kriti, we talked quite a bit about your view on spirituality. What I haven't outright asked you is about God. Does the concept of God play a role on your spiritual path? And if so, what is God to you?
Yeah, good question. What is God? It's love. It's love, I think. And it's the energy of love. And in a more tangible way, it's a friend who is just always there, supporting me and just being there. This is what, is a kind of if I try to put that mix of emotions that come up, it would be that. But above all, love, unconditional love.
That's beautiful. And you already hinted at this, and I'm wondering if there's more there of that vision. You talked about how you hope the future will be with people as friends and supporting one another. And this is a question that I really love asking guests on this podcast, just to sustain that positive vision for the future. imagine it's 50 years from now. And in 50 years from now, how do you hope that our consciousness, the consciousness of humanity, will evolve?
Yeah. Um, so I hope, and it's parts what Maitreya Dadashvili has shared out of that higher consciousness, is that it will be a world where the driving force behind everything will be love. So this is why we go now to this transformation phase, and where we are above all in harmony with ourselves and with Mother Nature, especially. It just always comes out, Mother Nature, just as natural. So, but where we are in harmony and where we live a probably much more simpler lifestyle, but where we are more content with what we have, which is based on values like, like love, togetherness, care, and yeah, where harmony prevails. That would be my vision, where the base of everything is love.
That's wonderful. And is there anything that I haven't asked you that you wish to share with our listeners?
Um, no, I don't think so. I think what I really would like to share or emphasize here is the importance of that personal spiritual transformation, like of that the transformation of every one of us, as it has an impact on the collective transformation, and that it's very very important, especially when we look at the rising mental health burden and everything, as a preventive and more preventive factor, and also as a resilience kind of strengthener, to really try to start to understand ourselves in a very natural way. What is it that we really want? What is it that we really need? How do we perceive ourselves? Like, how do we really see ourselves as a person? And to find the passion within you, because this is ultimately what the world really needs, is that we express our passion, because it can do magic, so that we learn about ourselves, understand ourselves, and then share this kind of jewel that every one of us is with the world, in the most natural way. So I think this is something that I really really want to share, because I've seen what it can do when we do not live our true self, but we try to hide behind masks and roles and whatever that we play, that we sometimes have to play, which is okay, but to ultimately really try to understand ourselves and realize our true self. And I think this is not just a nice to have or a kind of philosophical concept. I think it's a really need of the time, because only that will kind of lead a true foundation of a kind of compassionate society, because the change starts with us. And I know this is easy to say and it's a saying, but it is like that. So, and it's simpler than we think, and there are tools available for that. So
That's wonderful. What a beautiful note to end this on. And my last question to you, Kriti, is where can our listeners find you, online or offline?
so online, I have my homepage is kritinanda.com, and I'm also on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and offline in Zurich, in Switzerland, where you were too, and you moved now. So, and we never met here actually when you were here.
No, we didn't
So,
get to. That was a
yeah.
shame. Maybe on one of my visits back or when you come to the UK.
Or when I come to UK, yeah. So yeah, I'm currently based in Zurich.
Excellent. Kriti, I want to thank you so much for being here today. This was such a lovely discussion. And even though, I did the research on your work and your insights on your spiritual path, I feel there was so much more that came out today. And for that, I really, really want to thank you. I think our listeners are really going to enjoy this.
Thank you so much for giving that space and time, to making this wonderful time that we spent together possible. I just realized how fast the time passed. I truly enjoyed it. Thank you so much also for the amazing work you are doing.